All right, can you all see my screen? I believe we can all see my screen. If you can see my screen, send a thumbs up or say yes. All right, so good. So I can actually make it bigger. Let me just see if I can make it a slideshow. Yeah. So let me confirm again. Can you see this? Is it better in terms of the Zoom, the presentation? All right, that's awesome. So let's start working with API. So may I even ask, have we made any progress with LeetCode? So let me see how many LeetCode questions have you answered? Yeah, so I want response. Israel says 3. So just drop the number of questions you've answered on LeetCode. Hillary 4. Right, Solomon 1 this week. Okay, that's a good starting point. You need to move. Maxwell says 1. I'm not sure Solomon has done anything on LeetCode. What about Ruben? Louisa, I have not seen her. Is she on this class? Maxwell, yeah, 1. Where is Louisa? You didn't do LeetCode this week, right? Solomon, okay. So what has been your total so far? Jason, oh, you're still on 2. Jason, any progress made on LeetCode? Okay, Jason has not answered yet. So Louisa is not in this class. Not yet. Jason, you are monitored now. This time, next week, God willing, you should mention like 1 or 2, right? So please, it's very important. It should be our culture that every week we have at least 2 LeetCode solutions. I already told you that for some of you who have a very big dream of working for a company like Google, LinkedIn, Microsoft, if you have that kind of dream, I'll tell you that if you can target 100 questions on LeetCode, you are in already. You are in. So it takes discipline to even have a chance to work in that kind of environment. It takes a lot of experience, a lot of discipline. So for those of you who have big dreams, please try as much as possible to make it a culture every week. You can go for 5 or 3, but the least I'm mandating for you now is 2 per week. All right, let's move straight to what we have today, because our time is already fast spent. Now, working with API. Yeah, API, this is a very important topic. And for some of you who have heard about Internet of Things, Internet of Things will allow you to turn off your cooker even when you are not around. Turn off your bulb at home. I mean, when you're far away from home, you can turn it off. You can manage your appliances, your devices, your television, and critical devices like your switch, exactly. Your switch, which controls the electricity within your house. You can actually control them from remote. I mean, control them remotely. So how do you do that? The device has a kind of smart arrangement in it. That means the device is smart. It probably has a smart card in it. And there is an API, or there are a set of endpoints embedded into that device. that receives command from anywhere you are. So when you turn it, or when you probably have an app that controls it, you press off on your, or you toggle to off on your phone. You discover that at home, the device is turned off. You want to know the state of your device, you can use the app to check. So all of this are possible because of API. All of these are possible because of API. So that's why I said the topic today is something that transcends just coding. You know, it also has some impact in Internet of Things. All right, so what is API? Okay, today we're going to discuss the introduction to API. We'll be fetching data in React, and we'll also be using Axios for API calls. So it's basically going to be theoretical. I want you to solidify your experience in all of this. So we'll go deep more into theory. All right, so using Axios for API calls, then we will also discuss state management and API data. So let's hit the ground running. All right, so API acts as a bridge between the front end and the back end, and it allows you to send requests and receive responses in a structured format. So it's commonly used in web development to fetch and manipulate data from a server. So you know that we have front-end engineer or front-end developer, we have back-end developer. Now, what brings them together is integration. What is integration? The front end has developed the login page. You know, the design is beautiful, but you need to provide your email address and your password. When you provide both your email address and password, you click on login. There must be a system that will check the validity of your email address and your password. That is the backend system that is handled by the backend developer. Now, how does the front end communicate with the backend? The communication is made possible through what? Through APIs. So like I mentioned initially in the introduction, I said, when you are looking into Internet of Things, you have smart devices in your house, you can actually access them remotely because they already have a way of a programming interface on them that will accept commands, that will accept a payload, you know, and also use those payload to make some changes inside of them. So let's imagine an API as a waiter in a restaurant. So this is another way to break it down. Now, the customer is the front-end person, places an order that, okay, I need pizza. Hillary, what's your best food? Hillary, what's your best food? I want to place an order. Pilau. Wow. So I would have asked you, how does it look like? Then probably I'm going to do that. I'm going to find out after this. Maxwell is sending something. Kenyan jollof. I think I'll have to visit Kenya someday because I've been hearing about this Kenyan jollof over time. All right, so you are the customer, you place an order for a pilau. If I'm actually correct in pronunciation, I'm sorry. And Kenyan jollof, just like Maxwell said. So you are actually placing an order, and what you are actually doing is making API requests. Now, the kitchen is the backend. You know, the kitchen prepares the food that you order. Now, the waiter will take instructions from you You tell the waiter, I need pilau or Kenyan jollof. The waiter goes to the kitchen, which is the back end, prepares the food or probably picks up the food because it's been prepared and brings it back to you. So once you have the understanding of how it works, then you're already an API guru, right? So let's move on. So when you say API, I think I skipped the part that mentions the full meaning of API. Can someone help with the full meaning of API? Yeah, I mentioned programming interface the other time, remember? So it's not far from that. A programming interface. So the A means what? App. Oh, Louisa, you're back. Welcome. So it's application programming interface. So Israel, you shortened it to app. I think it's better. We make it application programming interface. Yes. So I skipped that slide. I'm sorry about that. So application programming interface, that's API. And it's a set of rules that allow one software application to interact with another. So let me just quickly add that it's very important that we know the full meaning of an API. So let me take it back to the, yeah. All right. So what is API? So API is an application programming interface. It's a set of rules that allow one software application to interact with another. So that is even beyond just the remote controlling of your devices. It allows software to interact with another. So let's go deep. So we have the REST API and GraphQL. So the popular one, or let me say the most popular kind of API is REST API, and REST represents a representational state transfer. That is the full meaning of REST. So with REST, you can come up with APIs, and with also with GraphQL, you can come up with API endpoints too. But our focus here will be, well, is actually API. So just have it in mind that you can use REST as a tool to transact with your endpoint or your API. Then you can also use the GraphQL. So what are the HTTP methods? What are the things that you actually do when you're using your API? You want to get. What does get mean? If I want to, let's assume that we have a table on the database that has a list of students. So I want to get the list of students for this class. I'll use get. So that's why it's not that difficult. A get is used to fetch resources from another platform, probably from the back end, you understand. So for a post, let's say that a new student is joining us and has filled an application form. We want to create a new resource. What I mean by new resource, I want to create a new record on the student table that we now have a new student in our midst. We need to use the post HTTP method. Now for the put, when you say put, what should come to your mind is modify. So if my age is 20 years, and from the back end, my age is showing 18 years. So I need to modify it. So in this case, I'm not doing a get, I'm not doing a post. I'll have to do a modification. And what helps me with that is a put. So you are putting something there and you are removing something away from it, or you are trying to modify what is existing. Then we have the delete. The delete is very, obviously we know what delete is about. So delete will help us to remove a resource. So when I say resource, you get used to it. Most of the time, it's called resource. but the general knowledge of it is records or record. So you want to delete a record, you use the delete HTTP method. So those 4 methods are what we should know, like the palm of our hands. So data is fetched from predefined endpoints. So you can fetch the data from /users. You understand? So when they said API endpoints, so like if you have /users, you actually want to fetch all the users, right? Or /students. So your /users, /students, /product is called the endpoint. So most times people mix up API and endpoints. So your endpoint is actually the last segment of the URL, of the API URL. So it shows where the resource is actually going to be fetched, where the resource is going to be posted, where it will be pulled or deleted. So that's your endpoint. All right, it often returns more data than needed. Yeah. So we're trying to look at what's the difference between REST API and GraphQL. Yeah, REST API is most commonly used, yeah, it's most commonly used, but the major difference between REST API and GraphQL, using them to handle your API, is one difference that it returns more than the needed data. So REST API returns more than the data that you need. And you know what that means? You are causing a lot of bandwidth or data usage for your user. So, but even with that, REST is a popular, excuse me, is a popular tool that, it's not that bogus in terms of the data that is fetched. Excuse me. Please a minute. Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. Okay, it's not that bogus like we think. All right, let's move on. So this is an example. You want to fetch a user from the REST API. So there is a tool or a method in JavaScript is called fetch. So when you use fetch, you actually want to get some responses from the backend. So you have to follow it to the core. You can see that URL, fetch https:/api.example.com/users. When you get to /users, you're already getting to the endpoint. So the endpoint is actually /users/1. So what this will mean is that you want to fetch one user. So you can see /1. That means you are fetching just a user. So then you will, if you're using the fetch endpoint, then you have to also use the .then. So there's a variable called response, and that response you have to convert it to a JSON object, because that's the object that we can actually read. Then after that, you take out the data from that response, and you can actually do anything with the data. Probably you want to update a state, you want to display a user, and you've got it already. Then you want to probably console log it, or you set the user to update it. So that's the way it works. And this is fetch. It's a natural method in JavaScript. Now for GraphQL, it works differently. So it uses a single endpoint. You can see /GraphQL1. So clients will specify exactly what data they need. So in this case, it will reduce overfetching and underfetching of data. So you actually need one record. So you specify it in GraphQL. So that's why I said even the rest is not bad. We can also specify it here as 1. So it all works the same way. But when you are so keen about being very, very exact in what you are fetching, then you probably want to use the GraphQL. Yeah, like I said, from my experience, I've worked more in environments that use the REST than the GraphQL. So it reduces overfetching and underfetching of data. So let's say if you are fetching a user with GraphQL, you can see that it follows the same process. Over here, you are not even fetching over here, you are posting. Remember, when you are posting, you are probably filling a form. You want to add a new resource to the platform. So that's when you use post. So of course, the fetch handles all of this. The fetch will help you get, the fetch will help you to post. The fetch will also assist you in making modification using puts. And if you want to delete the resources, the fetch will use delete. So in this case now, the fetch is using post. And you can see that this takes a little bit more, unlike the fetch, the get here. So over here, you are not seeing get. Actually, what is happening here is a get. So, but if you are posting, you can see that you have to specify the method. So if you are getting, you don't actually need to specify the method. And if you are posting, the difference again is that you are not just passing the URL, the endpoint, the API endpoint. Since you are posting, you have to create an object after the endpoint. Unlike here, unlike get, where you only have the URL. You only have the URL over here. That's a fetch URL. But for post, you have to add additional payload to it so that it will reflect what you are actually doing. So here we have post. So what are you posting? You are posting a title and a content. Probably somebody has made a new post, is filling your form on the front end. So you are going to send all of this in a stringified format. So it's a JSON stringified format, and you send your title and your content to the backend. All right, over here, you also specify the header. You have the content type, and the content type is application/JSON. So you're actually sending a JSON object, posting a JSON object to this API endpoint. Now, after you post, you want to know the response actually. You have .then of response, and the response that is coming, you have to pass it. It's been stringified. So for you to send to the backend, you have to stringify. But when you are bringing it back, you have to pass it by making it response.json. And after that, you get the data from the response. So you also use .then. And whatever you want to use the data for, you use it. But in this case, you're just console logging the data. All right. So let's go into put. Remember, put is about modification. So why do you want to use put? I gave an analogy the other time. My age is actually 20, but when you posted, you sent 18. That means we need to make changes or modifications to it. So that's where you use the put, and you remember that you're actually posting. The method is put, but what are you putting? You have the payload here, stringified. That's a body. So you have a title called updated post, and you have the content called updated content. Now, most times when you are using the put, you want to know what post are you modifying. So you want to specify the ID of that post. So if my ID is 1, then I want to make modification on 1. That is why you pass it here as 1. So most times when you use put, you must send something that is unique to that particular record you are updating. So you can here over here, let's go to the previous one. You can see here we have new post. This is a new post. Now we now have an updated post, updated content. So if it's the same ID that has been generated here, so it will replace new posts with updated posts because we are using the method called put. Remember, unlike get, in get, we don't send anything to the backend. We only call the endpoints so that it will fetch all of those stuffs to us. So we don't have reasons to use this called brackets. It's only the API endpoint that you are going to fetch. It's a get, and that's why you don't even specify the method. So over here, the same way you get the response, you pass it, you JSON, you format it with JSON because that's what the front end can read. Then you console log the data from that response. Okay, so let's move to delete. Yeah. So now delete is almost like get, but it's not totally like get. Now, when you are deleting, you don't have any reason to send any payload because you only need to specify the post that you are deleting. So that's why when you are using puts and you are using delete, you have to send the ID, the parameter, they call it params sometimes. They call it params, yeah, to send it so that once the backend receives that request and receive the method as post, the backend just checks the resources or the database and says, okay, post one needs to be what? Deleted. And once we have a response, you can just log that the deletion has been successful. So most of the time, the response will come from the backend. So we can just add code it and say it's deleted successfully. So you can see that the implementation is not difficult at all. When you are using get, you only need your API endpoint. When you are using post, you need to specify the type of content, which is a JSON, because you already turned it to JSON here. You stringified it here. So it has to be content type application.json. The same thing for post, all right? But for delete, you only need to specify the method that, okay, what you are doing to this post is you are deleting, all right? So is there any question so far? Are we all together? I need one or two of you to, yeah. So, enjoying it. Thank you so much. All right. I believe the same for every one of us. So let's go to understanding JSON response format. JSON is known as a JavaScript object notation. Is a lightweight format for storing and transporting data. Thank you, Ibrahim. Transporting data. So it's used for exchanging data between client and server. So we've used it previously, and in most cases, if you are to send payload to the backend, you use JSON. If you are to get the response, you also convert to JSON. So you use .json on the response, then you get the data. So a JSON object is very simple. It's a JSON object is unlike a normal object. You can see it comes with property and value. It comes with property and value. We have a property called ID, and the value is 1. We have a property called name, and the value is John Doe. We have a property called email, and the value is john@example.com. You can see that, JSON object will have its properties quoted, double quotes in most cases. So the values may not be quoted. So if the value is an integer or a number, you don't quote that. But if it's a string, then you quote it. Yeah, the value could also be an array. You understand? So just understand that all the properties, when you're using props in a JSON object, you have to quote the property, and for the values, you need to be sure that, okay, it's a string, you quote. If it's a number, you don't quote. And it can also come in form of objects, can also come in form of array. So JSON is JavaScript object notation. So how do we access JSON data? I believe you remember this. This endpoint is fetching one user, and it got the response, and it formats the response as JSON so that we'll be able to read it. Then data, it gets data from the response. Now the data received from the response is an object. The reason why it's an object is because we are only fetching one user. So, and the one user will come in form of the name and the email. So what has come here is the name, John Doe, the email, john@example.com. So for you to fetch out the content of that object, you use data.name. Then for the name, use data.name. For email, use data.email. So it's as simple as that. So that's accessing JSON data in JavaScript. All right. So at this time we'll move into the quiz. So I want you to drop your answers as fast as possible so that we can go through this quiz faster and move to the next one. So drop your answers. All right, majority chose A. That's good. That's great. So it's application programming interface. Let's move to number 2. Okay, so I think I've not been charging my system, so I had to, yeah. All right, A is the answer, correct. So additional display allows slides to connect and present to additional display, not now. All right, so I think I need to, all right, sorry, I need to check what is going on. All right, so please don't mind the it's not well formatted. So number 2 and 3, just drop 2, 3, maybe B, C, A, D, drop it that way. So which API type uses a single endpoint for all requests? What HTTP method? Okay. So single API for all requests. All right. Some of you selected A and A, some said C, okay. So I'm glad to let you know that the correct answer for 2 is C. And if you remember that we only use a single endpoint for GraphQL. Yeah, we didn't actually touch a number of examples on GraphQL, but one of the features of GraphQL is that you use only a single endpoint, and it's always /GraphQL. So the client will send queries specifying the exact data they need, and it will, it avoids overfetching of data and under fetching too. So it fetches you the exact data. So the answer is C. Then for 3, which HTTP method is used to retrieve data from a server? That should be get, which is C. So let's move to the next one. Please don't mind the numbering. Next. Yeah. Maxwell, I can see your answer. CC, yeah. CC, okay. So Solomon, you didn't send 2 answers, you only sent 1. All right, CC, yeah. We're all seeing the answers in C, CC, okay, a carbon copy. All right, next one. Next. So Mariana, are you here? I've not been seeing your, okay, yeah, Mariana, I can see. Yeah. So Jeffrey, try to send the 2 answers at the same time, okay? So Jason says D and B. Israel Maxwell, I'm waiting for you. Hilary, D and B. It seems D and B is popular. So let's see. Which HTTP method? Okay, Jeffrey says B and B. Okay, let's see. Maxwell says C and B. Good. So let's try to check who has the right answer. So which HTTP method is used to send data to create a resource? Remember I said when you are creating a resource, you use POST. All right. So the first one is D. You use POST. You are creating a resource. Like I made mention of the example of a student joining us, and we want to enroll that student on the students table. You use POST. And you post the name, the email, the address, and the likes. So D is the answer. So what is the primary purpose of an API? So majority of you chose B. To store user data, facilitate communication between software applications, design user interfaces, create front-end applications. So the answer is B. So Ibrahim, you got it all wrong. Design user interfaces, no. You use React to design user interface, right? Or Angular or Material UI and all those things. So to facilitate communication between different software applications, you need the API to do that. Okay, so next, let's quickly move to the next question. Hilary, yeah, B and B. The other time it was C and C. Are you sure it's B and B? B and B, majority is going for B and B. All right. Okay, you know, when you're making modifications, you actually use the puts. So B is correct for the first one. And for the second one, JSON is based on objects. If you remember, we have the property, we have the property and the value. So, and you remember that your JSON objects must always have your properties quoted in probably double quotes. Yeah, single quotes can also work, but most of the time I use double quotes in my coding. So for the second one, of course, is based on JSON object. So next, this is the last question in this segment. So where is the body data sent? Okay, good. Where is the body data sent? Okay. I've not seen my answer. Okay, in the request body. Yeah, maybe A. Okay, so it's a very technical question. You need to be sure of what you are replying with. So, and we need to, since we have varying answers, we need to go back to the examples. All right. So, where is it sent? Where is it sent? So let's go back to the example. And over here, we are posting. Yeah, this part is actually when you see the fetch http API examples.com/post, that line, that part is what? That part is the URL. I'm sure you cannot see any post here. The URL starts with a quote and ends with the ending quote, and that's all. So that is not correct. A is not correct, Solomon. Yeah, I only tricked you to selecting A because I said I didn't see my answer. Now, this bracket, this curly bracket, this side is called the request part. So this is what you're actually taking. This is like a letter you are taking to the backend. This is the address of the backend, and this is the letter you are taking there. So just have that in mind. Probably you are going to New York. The first part, that's the URL part, is going to take you there transportation wise. Then the request part of it is where you have the curly bracket. So those are the payload. That's the message you're actually taking to your destination. So, and this is where you have the data. This is where you have the body here, right? This is where you have the header. This is where you have the method. So inside of the request segment, that's where you actually have it. So I hope you've been able to understand what they mean by, what the question means by where you have it. So it's not inside of the URL, it's inside of your request scope. All right. So let's move on. If you're fine with what we've done, send a thumbs up. I need just 2 so that we can move to the next one. All right, I can see, yeah, Marianne and Israel, you both are satisfied. I believe all others too are satisfied. Let's move to the next one. Please don't hesitate. If you have a question, just drop it, and I'm going to answer appropriately. So let's go into fetching data in React. Yeah, all of things we've done so far has been on JavaScript, right? And you know, our main focus in this series of classes is React, building a strong, a maintainable and efficient front-end application. So React applications, how do we fetch in React application? So yeah, of course we use the fetch. You know, React is just is called JavaScript library. So everything that is possible with JavaScript will definitely be possible in React. The only thing is that React is used to build user interfaces, right? User the components and the likes. So the common use cases in React is when you want to post data, you want to, to fetch data, you probably want to delete a particular record, or you want to modify. So React provides multiple ways to handle asynchronous data fetching. Yeah, so let's move on. So what is fetch? We have already mentioned what fetch is about in our last segment. So fetch is inbuilt, is JavaScript function for making network requests. It returns a promise that resolves to the response object. And the example we have here, you have the API endpoint, that's /post. We have the .then, that's the response. So the data, that's the data from the response. So we have the promise. You remember promise, right? In our previous class, we mentioned promise. That promise can be in 3 states. What are the 3 states? Can someone remind me? 3 states of promise. So please type it out. 3 states of promise. 3 states of promise. Have you forgotten? Yeah, when you use promise, is just one of these 3. It's either it's pending. It's either it's pending. That means it's not been called, or it has been called but response has not come, or it is resolved. So resolved means that it's fulfilled. Yeah. Then the third one is reject. All right. So please, it's pending. Pending means that it's still trying to fetch. Resolve and reject. Okay. So pending, resolve, and reject. So resolve is when you have the data, right? And reject is when you have the error. So please, this is very fundamental. You need to understand this. So if you call an endpoint and it does not, instead of sending you the data, it's sending you an error. So it means that it's going to be captured within the error, scope over here, right? But if it's resolving successfully, that means it's fulfilled. Yeah, pending is the initial state. Thank you, Ibrahim. So at the initial stage, it's pending. That means we have not got a response. So let me just give an example. Let's say I'm a friend to Ibrahim, right? And Ibrahim has just bought pizza, and I want to eat a part of that pizza. and Ibrahim is actually sitting down on working on a code. The pizza is beside him. And I say, Ibrahim, please, I want to eat your pizza. So what happens if Ibrahim does not talk at that time? It's in the pending state. So if Ibrahim says, oh, why not? You're my brother. No, you can take a part of it. And I think that's what Ibrahim is going to say to me, right? So that's resolve. So it's successful. But if Ibrahim has to now say, that's what you're doing now, okay. So Ibrahim now says that, get out. Do you know how much I bought this pizza? I don't want you to have any bites. That means it's an error. That's a rejection state. So once you have that knowledge, promise will not be a problem. All right. So these are things that you need to understand. We have promise. In a promise, you have it as pending. After pending, there is going to be a response. If there is no response, that means there's an error. Are you getting? I hope you understand that analogy. If you understand, just send a thumbs up and let's move on. All right, Israel, thank you. So the key points, fetch takes the URL as an argument. This we have already seen in the past examples. Fetch will take a URL endpoint like www.api.example.com/students endpoint. So, and we have .then. .then will give us response, and we'll convert the response to JSON. And from there, we also get the data from it. So we can only get the data once the response is converted to JSON. All right. So we're going to Axios. So, and I'm sure once you understand this, you understand the basic difference between Axios and Fetch. So Fetch is natural to JavaScript, and it's working perfectly well. But we get to read Axios very soon. So we have the catch. That's where the error actually shows. Probably the back end is saying that, okay, this the username and password invalid, or they are this, they are that. So, or sometimes if there is a server error, the server will send that there is an error. We cannot process your request now. So that is that's for the catch, for the error aspect. So imagine somebody is in a pending state for a while. The next thing is it's going to throw error, because that means that person is not even responding. You understand? That's your server error, not responding. So in that case, you don't know if the person actually wants it or not. So you just assume that, well, it's bringing back errors, right? So how do you handle promise? Remember, in promise we have resolve and reject. So when you have the resolve, that means it's going to show within the then scope. When you have the reject, it's going to show within the catch bracket, right? So that is what we have. So for the then, you have the response and you convert the response to the JSON format. For the catch, you have the error and you want to show what the error is like. So in React, it will tell you what the error is actually about. So you can use console.log, you can use console.error. It's all the same. It's going to show when you use the console.error, it's going to show the error in your terminal, right? All right, so let's move on. Now, what are the common mistakes we make? So that's why by writing this code to catch error, promise.catch error, yes, exactly. The output will show error code. Not really. Here you are console logging the error. The error can be anything. You cannot add code the error. So the error coming from the backend can be server error. It can be server error. It can be what else? You understand? Whatever the server sends to you. So you cannot actually add code the error. It could be error occurred too, error occurred, right? So, but it's going to be whatever the it's going to be whatever the server sends. So it will not always be error occurred. So whatever the server sends is going to display it. All right. So let's see the common mistakes. Can you see the common mistakes? If you do a dot catch, what are you catching? So in this case, the guy is not catching anything. So what are you catching? Nothing. So you need to put the error inside the catch brackets. But if you forget to do that, then it will tell you there's an uncaught errors there. So you have to be very careful with that. So the next one is when you are not calling response.json, it will cause a raw response data to be logged. So what this means is that for you to call your data, the first thing you do is what? Convert your response to JSON. All right. So all of these errors you should not have issues with it when you are writing your React codes. So please, it's very important that you do it the right way. Okay. All right. So let's move to the next slide. Now, I've mentioned this, I think, in the last class or thereabouts. I can't remember, probably 2 classes ago. A way to handle your errors is using async and await. And can you remind me, 2 classes ago, thank you, yeah, I think I remember. So I want you guys to tell me 3 types of asynchronous operation. So I want to type it right away. Asynchronous, examples of asynchronous operation. Yeah, Jason is typing something. Louisa, I have not seen you type anything for a while. So yeah, Jerome, you're welcome. You came very late. So you are paying $5,000 for coming late. Do you agree or not? So yeah, fetching data from the database is asynchronous, right? So network operation is asynchronous. All right. When you set timeout to is asynchronous, you try to ensure that something happens after something, after a process and the rest. So let's move on because of our time. So why do we use async and await? It simplifies the asynchronous code and it makes it more readable. It reduces the nested dot then chains. So imagine you have to put dot then, let's go back to this. Imagine you have to write dot then on 2 lines, dot then response, dot then users. It doesn't look that neat. So with raw promises, you have reasons to use dot then, dot then, dot then, like 3 times, 4 times before you use dot catch. But if you use async and await, it simplifies the whole thing. It makes your code looks a bit more matured. So that's the way it works. So let's see how it's used. Okay, Lisa is typing something. Yeah, queries like the ones we use in database. Yeah, it's an asynchronous operation. Yeah, network operations are asynchronous. Thank you. You've made it. You've completed it for me. So now let's see. After this screen, I'm going to ask you which would you prefer? Are you going to prefer async await, or you are going to prefer promise? So let me explain. I've explained promise. Let me explain the async await. So for the async function here, you are running an asynchronous function that you want to fetch users, right? So you now say, okay, try. You already mentioned that is an async function up there. Then inside of the function block, you use a try and catch method. So on the try, you can see let response be equal to await. So when you use async, you use await inside of the block. So and you can await as many times. I mean, you can use await more than once. You understand? So what you're actually trying to do is that you want the application to run, you want the backend to run regardless of what you are doing. So that's why it's an asynchronous asynchronous operation. So, but if it is synchronous, that means every other thing will stop until this process is completed. So you await the fetching, and when you await the fetching, it gives you a response. Even the response, converting the response to JSON, you await it. Yeah. So that at the end of the day, you'll be able to get the users and you console log the users. So what this means is that it makes your code very smooth. You know, all this .then is no more used here. And as usual, you have a catch. So a catch. Jerome has left. I hope it's not his network, or did he leave because I sanctioned him $5,000? Miriam, what happened? Okay, is Jerome back? Jerome, are you there? All right. So so if I may ask you now, what would you prefer? Just be sincere, actually. Would you prefer async await, or you prefer the promise? Yeah. Would you prefer the then catch or async await? Israel, what would you prefer? Geoffrey? Yeah. Async await. Oh, Maxwell, you prefer promise? Oh no. Oh no. Yeah, promise is gonna work, right? But by the time you start working on real world projects and collaborating with others, you know that promise is gonna be very, very stressful. So async await is still recommended, right? So you are saying you make your function to be asynchronous, and you can await your response without any problems. Okay, so what are the key benefits of async functions? Async function will always return a promise. All right, so it will always return probably a fulfilled promise. Oh yeah, Ibrahim. Yeah, async await is highly recommended. So await will pause the execution until the promise resolves. So what this means is that it reduces, it eliminates the possibility of sending an error to the front end. You understand? So if you await, that means I tell you, please wait. You understand? You say, please wait for 30 seconds. When you say, please, I probably want to collect something from you. And when I get to you, I'm like, please, can you give me what I want to collect? You say, okay, please wait. Yeah, the please wait means that I have a hope that you are going to give me. It's only going to be there's only going to be a delay of 30 seconds, right? So, but if I ask you, can you give me what you wanted to give me, and you don't respond, I can just be angry and leave. And when I leave, you know what that means? That's an error. That's a rejection. And the reality could be that at that time you're actually busy with something and you don't want to take your attention off it. What will make me have a little patience is await. You understand? So that's why Node.js or JavaScript uh, programming platforms, like their framework, is always very efficient, because it will not assume. It will just wait until that request is sent. And now if it waits for a long time, you can now have it like, okay, the server is not responding. You understand? So, but you don't assume that you have been rejected. So that is why we have the await. And that kind of setting is performance based and is highly efficient. All right. Okay, so let's move on. Error handling. How do you handle error? When you fetch data, sometimes there could be internet issues. The server could be down. Yeah. So, and we have API responses. You understand? We can have 404. When you say 404, it's not found. May I even ask, what is 403? What is status 403? When you receive a response and it's 403, what is the interpretation? Also, what is 200 and 201? So what's 403? When the response sends you a 403 status, yeah, 200 means success. Okay, what of 201? Yeah, 403 means forbidden or you're not authorized, right? Yeah, 201 means created. So when you post, like a new student has joined us and we want to add that new student to the database, you post, you use the post HTTP method, and when you use that, you're actually creating a new resource, and the response that you receive will be 201. When you see a 201, you are sure that that resource has been created successfully. You understand? So for a 200, maybe you send a delete, or you do a get, or you do a put. As long as you are not creating something new, it's going to return 200. That means the operation has been successful. So, but if it is 201, it means that you have been able to create. No, Ibrahim, no, connection with server is not 201. So if it is 201, it means that you have done a post operation successfully. So 201 is always attached to a post operation. That means if you are creating a record on the database. I hope you get it, Ibrahim. Please don't mix it up. So it's connectionless. I think you are mixing it up. You understand? 201 is a status message that comes from the backend. After you have posted something, you posted a new resource, it sends you a response. So most times the backend will not send you the real thing that actually happened. You understand? So it's like me entering inside a room with to solve a problem. So if I solve that problem, I'll tell you 201. When I tell you 201, that means the problem was solved successfully. So that's the status. So I don't need to tell you that the problem was solved successfully. So when you receive a 201, you can communicate with the people using the React that, okay, it's a 201. That means the process was done. Exactly, is a response payload. Yeah, a status, sending the status of what you have done. You understand? What you have done is giving you a response. All right, so we are done with those status code. So invalid JSON responses. Now, JSON responses are expected to be object, and if they are invalid, you know what that means. It will send an error to the front end. So looking into this, you can see that this is just a typical fetch. You are fetching the post number 1. That's what you are fetching here. And the response comes with OK. So if the response does not come with OK, you understand, or if the OK is false, that means you have to, the status of that operation is going to be with error. You understand? So that's why you have this status, response or status will be error. But if it is actually OK, you are going to get the data. So you can see now that this is just an if block. So if it is not OK, instead of going to process the response, it will just tell you that the status is not OK, or the status is 404. You understand? So because most of the time, response.status will give you the status code 404, 403. Anything that starts with 4, it means that the operation actually failed. But if it starts with 2, you are sure that the operation has been successful. So let's move on. So always check the response.OK, you understand, before you process data further. Over here, you can see that response.OK is checked. So if the response.OK is true, fine. We don't even need to check if it is true. What we are checking, if it is false, don't even go beyond this. Just let us know the kind of response that is. So it's like the if block is giving condition based on status. Yes, the if block is actually helping us not to go too far if there is an error already. You understand? So if there is an error, it's like your flight has been your flight has been cancelled and you've not been sent the message. So you have to spend, huge amount of money to get to the airport. And you get to the airport, you wait till the flight arrives, the plane arrives. And at that point, they are now telling you that your flight has been cancelled. How will you feel? You feel bad. So, but if you receive the message earlier that your flight has been cancelled, then that's fine. So that's what that if is doing there. The if is trying to check, is the response coming from the back end okay? If it's not okay, just stop there. Just throw this error and stop. If it is okay, then proceed into the next phase. So always check the response.okay, before processing data. As a programmer or as a developer, it is very important that you check for errors. Because if you don't check for errors, you will use a variable that does not exist. So you will assume that it was sent and you use it in a calculation. And imagine when you are using an undefined value in a calculation, it's going to throw up error and everything is going to be upside down. Please always check for errors, always validate your data, before you proceed. So that's why you have the if that will help you to truncate any abnormalities earlier rather than allowing you to get deeply into your code and making you look like someone that actually doesn't understand how to code. So so you use the error, you check the response, you catch the error too, and you log it for debugging purpose. All right, let's go to the quiz for the second segment. We still have probably 2 segments more to go. So let's give our answers to this. I'm waiting 30 seconds. Okay, yeah. What method is used to convert response to JSON? Oh, BB, it's all BB. Okay, let's move on. You're right. Next. Yeah, the question seems a bit technical, but it's just what we've been doing. So what happens if an error occurs in the .then, but no .catch is used? So some of you said the browser crashes. Browser crashes, right? So that's not the answer. I mentioned something, I think the last illustration I did, I made it very clear. Yeah. All right. So majority of you got the answer for number 2 correctly. That's what does async indicate? Async in JavaScript indicates that the function is asynchronous. Now, the other time, let's go back to what we have here. All right. I explained this the other time. Can you remember? Yeah, I said that once there's a fetch and the response is not okay, right? It throws this error. It doesn't even reach the catch at all. You understand? So what it means is that this error is ignored. It's ignored. Okay, so what is the expected answer? So what's the expected answer now? So the error is ignored. So that's that should be A, right? Yeah, thank you, Ibrahim. A, and the next one will be B. So the answer is A and B. Oh, that's Miriam. So the error is ignored because the error, the catch is not used. So since catch is not used, the error is not being passed. The error cannot exist without the catch. And if you don't use the catch, then the error is not necessary. So the error is ignored. And the code will not stop. Remember, I said the code will just, the code will send a response at the if block. So it doesn't stop, it doesn't crash the code. It only says that the journey of 1,000 miles that will not be successful. Let me go back on the 10th mile. You understand? So that's how it works. So can we have answers to this now? Please let's move very fast so that we can cover the remaining parts of this lecture. So what's a cleaner way to handle this? So let's keep our answers coming. Yeah, they are very technical, I know. So it will help you to actually understand what exactly it's about. So the cleaner way to handle async calls, we've already showcased that. That's async and await, right? Async and await. And also for you to handle errors in async and await, you use the try and catch method. So the answer is C and B. So Ibrahim, you got the first one wrongly. So the answer to the first one is async await. We've not mentioned callback in any of our session, not any of our teachings. So just have it in mind. The cleaner way to handle async calls will be async and await. And if you want to handle error, you use try and catch. Yeah. So instead of the try, you have positive response, or you also be able to log the errors if them. Then instead of the catch, you have this error being logged. You understand? So what next? Next, so let's have answers to this so that we can move very fast to the next section. Yeah, please read further about it. So what happens if you forget await in the async function? So these are just possibilities. These are things you can even simulate, yourself, right? So what happens if you forget to await, you've used async, but you forget to await. And also, what ATP method is used for retrieving data? That's get. That's very direct. All right, so if you forget to use await, the function will return a promise. So if you call an async function, but you forget the await, so the function will still return a promise, and the code will continue to execute without waiting for the promise to resolve. So, await is used to pause. You understand? When you want to pause, you use await. So when you don't use await, that means the code will continue to be executed, and the function will return a promise, right? So what about this? What's the purpose of response.ok and primary advantage of using async and await? So can we move very fast with that? So Ibrahim, the other one was C and A, right? So what's the purpose of response.ok? Yeah. And also, what's the primary advantage of using async and await? Yeah, the first one, of course, A is the answer. We should know that. It checks if it's successful. And for the second one, I think that was a little technical, right? So what's the primary advantage of using async and await? It's all right. So why do you use async and await? It makes the code synchronous. It improves the speed and simplifies asynchronous code readability, and it prevents the all errors. So if I were you, I will use this elimination method. Number one, does it make the code synchronous? No, because we are running away from synchronous, from the issues that comes with synchronous coding. Number two, does it improve the speed? Um, does it improve the speed? Well, somehow it does. It simplifies asynchronous code readability. It prevents all errors. So I think C moves is closer answer. So we have A and C. So now, so we're done with that. So let's look at Axios. Right. So do you have any question? Please post on the chat. Let's post on the chat. Let me see what level are we. We're going to 60 something. Yeah. So, all right. So let's move to Axios, 1A and 2C, right? Fine. So for Axios, Axios is something like Fetch, right? But Axios is promise-based. It's a promise-based HTTP client for making API requests. So if you don't want to use Fetch, you want to use Axios. And Axios is like a kind of improved version of Fetch. So it works on both the browser and the Node.js environment. So what it means that if you are into backend development, you can fetch data from another backend into a backend, right? So that's quite helpful. And also it supports request and excuse me, request and response interpretation and automatic transformation and error handling. So what do we mean by automatic transformation? Yeah, in Fetch, you need to convert to JSON, right? You need to convert the response to JSON. But when you use Axios, you don't need to go through all that stress. So let's move to the next slide. I hope you guys can see my screen. So can you guys see my screen? All right. Okay. So let's move to the next one. So I think there's this responsiveness that. All right. So advantages of Axios, it simplifies the syntax. So Axios automatically passes the JSON responses. So it makes you type less code. Error handling, it provides better error messages and response status handling. Request and response interception, it modifies the request before sending and handles the response globally, right? It allows request cancellation using cancel token. It easily sets request timeouts. So what it means is that if you make a request and the request is supposed to be returned within 30 seconds and it's not returned, so instead of using up your data and keep making that request, it will easily set a request timeout for it. So it also works on older browsers. Unlike Fetch, Axios supports older browsers without polyfill. So meaning that it's compatible with many browsers version, right? So let's see how Axios is used. So look at Fetch. So I'm going to ask you a question after now. Would you prefer Fetch or Axios? So look at Fetch. We want to fetch. We want to get the post from the backend. We use fetch. Then we pass the URL. Then the response. We converted the response to JSON. Then data. We console log the data, and we also got the error, and we catch the error. So look at Axios. Axios.get. You pass in the URL, and on the response, can you see that you have no reasons to do .json? You don't have to convert it to .json. So Axios has helped you. Axios has actually helped us to reduce the number of lines of code. So if you want to be if you want people to tell you that you're a guru, what somebody is achieving using 30 lines of code, you're achieving it using probably 15 lines of code, and you're achieving it well. So attention will be drawn to you that, okay, this guy is actually good, right? Is actually good. So so you have to always look out for what will make your code lines reduced and what will make your application improved. So Axios has helped us. So if I may ask, Hillary, would you prefer Axios to Fetch? And Jeffrey, Solomon, I've not. Hope you guys are awake. So if you like Axios, yeah, Axios is good. Yeah. Maxwell, would you prefer Axios to fetch with all of these characteristics, all of these properties of Axios? Maxwell, yeah. All right, so Axios all the way. So how do you install Axios? You make use of, yeah, thank you, Maxwell. So you make use of npm install when you're in your React environment. Just do npm install, and you want to make use of it inside of your code. You do import Axios from Axios. So it's just very, very easy to use, very clean, and not verbose. So how do you make get requests in Axios? We've already mentioned that example. You do axios.get. So unlike fetch, where you have to pass the .get, I mean, why you don't have any reasons to pass .get in Axios, you have to use .get, right? So let's say, how do we make a post request in Axios? Now, this time around, try and remember what's the difference between using fetch for posts and using Axios for posts. Can someone just point out that difference? Israel, what's the difference between the way we posted using fetch and the way we are posting now using Axios? What's the difference? In the way we fetched, we used posts during fetching. I mean, while we actually use fetch and Axios. Jason, thank you. You're going to give us, I can see like 3-4 differences now. So who is not spotting the difference? All right, when posting, you pass the body on like fetching, right? So no, that is the difference between post and fetch. So what I was asking for is when you are using Axios to post and when you are using fetch to post, what's the difference? All right, so let me just point out the differences. Okay, Brian, you want to help us? You don't need to pass the requests body. No, I don't agree with you. All right, yeah. You don't need to stringify. Yeah, you wanted to say stringify, Hillary. So you don't need to stringify the request. So remember that Axios has some inbuilt way of handling JSON. So that's why you don't need to do response.json when you are using Axios. So the same way, you don't need to stringify. You understand? Hillary, I hope you got that correction. So it's not passing, it's stringify. All right, that's great. So also another difference is that you don't need to indicate the content type. Yeah, you don't need to indicate the content type. So content type, the other time we are using get, I mean, if you are using fetch, you use content type, then application/JSON, right? But in posts, in Axios, you don't need to show a content type because Axios has already abstracted all of those things. So these are the reasons why many developers use Axios, right? So another thing is this fetch await response on like Axios. No. Please, it's not about the async and await. It's about the way fetch works. So, and lastly, fetch, when you are posting using fetch, you don't use fetch.post. Over here, you can see that we have Axios.post. You understand? When you are using Axios, you have to specify what operation are you actually doing. Is it a get, Axios.get? So in fetch, you have the post inside of a method. You have method post, right? So you can actually go back to, if you have the video, you're watching the video, then you can go back to the previous one. Okay, so let's move. So you have a put also here. So you do Axios.what put. All right. Unlike in fetch, you don't specify the operations here. You specify here, you say method put, but Axios.put already clears that method put. So that's fine. So, and also for delete, you have Axios.delete, right? So there's something we call global configuration in Axios when you are using Axios inside of React. So you have to set it up globally. And how do you set it up globally? So you want to reuse the Axios. So, and you remember that React, one of the benefits of using React to develop your front end is reusability. So you want to be able to reuse Axios. You don't want to always call, say, Axios dot. You don't want to always do that. So you have to create an instance for that Axios. And this is the way you create the instance. You say const API, you can give it any name. So you say Axios.create. And inside of the instance, you are going to specify the base URL. You remember I said endpoint is different from an API endpoint is actually the directory you are going. Is that directory you're actually working on? So but you have a base URL that doesn't change. So also you have headers here. You specify the content type, and we also have authorization parts where you specify the access token. So for the access token, there are sometimes you want to fetch something from the backend. If you are not authorized to fetch, it will return it and say not authorized and probably send you status code of 403. So in that case, you need to go with your BRR token. You need to go with your probably JWT token that you have received from the backend so that you identify you as someone that has the permission to access that resources, okay? So and once you do that, all you need to do here is just do API.get. You don't need to use Axios.get anymore. So you have already created the instance of Axios inside of API. Just do API.get and you say /post. Remember, this /post is the what? Is the endpoint. So instead of having something long, well, normally you are going to have https/json placeholder that typical /com/post. You can see that this is very tidy, very, very tidy. So you create an instance of your API and you call it here. You have just 3 lines. And if you have to connect, use the Axios again, you not have more than 3 lines or thereabouts. So does that make sense at all? Does that make sense, Louisa? Yeah. So what do you feel about it? Does it make life easy? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it does. So, all right, let's move on. So let's move to the quiz now. After this, we're going to have the last one, then we'll call it a day. So can you give me answers to this? Let's move very fast. What is Axios? And what's one advantage of using Axios over Fetch? Yeah, Axios supports older browser. Yeah, we've mentioned that. Good. Yeah, Axios is a promise-based HTTP client. Yeah. Yeah, so the answer is B and B. Louisa, you mentioned C and B. No. You don't use Axios Axios is not a framework for building APIs, okay? So if you want a framework for building APIs, an example is Express, and that is more of a backend thing, you understand? So you use Axios is a promise-based HTTP client, and it supports older browser. So aside the fact that it helps you it abstracts a lot of JSON conversion. All right. So next, how do you install Axios in a project, and how do you make a GET request using Axios? Okay, Jason says B and A. B and A, correct. Which method is used for sending data to an API using Axios? Yeah, we're on another question now. Okay, so sending data. I think I have a little disruption here. So which method is used for sending data to an API using Axios? I think the answer should be send. Is the answer send? No. Sending data to an API. I want to get you guys' response. I think I want to maintain the screen. Or better still, the extended screen is giving me a little issue. So let me just collapse the whole stuff and all right. So I will. All right. Sorry, my other screen was not displaying. I couldn't see what you are posting. So I have to use one screen now. All right, you guys have posted the answers. I'm sorry. So the advantage of setting a base URL, oh, sorry, there's a mix-up. All right, which method is used for sending data to an API? So you use .post, that's a B, right? And how do you handle errors in Axios? Use .catch, try and catch both A and B. None of the above. None of the above is wrong. C is correct. Yeah. So B and C, right? So what next? What's the purpose of Axios does create? So have you guys answered that? Yes. You undo errors using try and catch in an async await function. Yes. Yeah, Jeffrey, yes. So the answer to that is C, right? Yeah, C. You can use both of them. So what's the answer to this? Purpose of Axios of create. Oh, you can't see my screen. I'm sorry. Let me check again. What's going on? Oh, more. So I'll stop sharing, then start again. Can you see my screen now? Okay, you can't now. All right. So I was using double screen. I was using one of the screens to monitor your responses and the like. So yeah. So what's the answer to this? Axios was creates. Can we send our answers? Remember I mentioned that Axios of create is used to create an instance of, okay, zoom in the screen. All right, so what I'll do is that I'll show a slideshow and I will assume that you are, I won't be able to monitor your answers. So but the answer for this will be to create a new React component, no. To set up custom Axios instance with global settings, yeah, B is the right answer. To fetch data from API, no. To delete API data, no. So the answer here is B, right? So how do you set global headers in Axios? So I don't think we covered this. So Axios.default headers, Axios.default headers.global, Axios.default.headers.common, Axios.set global headers. So let me see. So sorry, I won't be able to if I minimize this automatically, it will you'll not be able to see it in a zoomed manner. So that's why I have to maximize it this way. So so what's our answer for this number 2? So the answer should be we didn't cover it like I said. So the answer should be Axios dot default dot headers dot common. Yeah, the answer is C. Yeah. So what's the advantage of setting a base URL in Axios? Prevent errors, reduce repetition, increase speed, none of the above. All right. So why do we do that? Let me see your responses. I think it's very important that B and B, I can see B and B. All right. So, okay. It's not that easy to expand. Okay. So let me go back to the screen. Where's that screen? All right. So B and B. How do you send a delete request? So you're right, B and B. So this is the last aspect of our tutorial. So let me just take time to go through it, right? All right, thank you. Yeah, state management and API data in React. So I think over the time we've been talking about use state, use effects. We said use state is used to manage the state of a component in React, and we've talked about it extensively. Even in the last class, we talked about when we discussed React advanced topics in React. So why would you want to manage the states? You want to display the list of students on your front end, but it's not hard coded. It means that you have to get it through the API. You understand, endpoints. So once the list is dropping on your front end, you need to be able to manage it so that it doesn't drop off, because you can't keep calling the backend. It's going to take a lot of data from your users. So what you want to achieve is that you want to be able to get the list of all students, and you want to be able to keep them in state. That is where you have the use state. Also, you don't want to fetch all the time. So you want use effects to be able to manage the side effects. So you can see that you need both. Anytime you are fetching anything from the endpoint, you need to make use of use state to keep it, and use effect to stop fetching multiple calling of the fetch function, right? So use state in a React hook allows the function component to manage state. It's and you use it to store and update API response data. Now, looking at this example, you can see we have data, we have set data, and the current state is empty, meaning that there is no data. It's just an empty array. And next one, you see that we have mapped the data.map, and it's supposed to show item title and put it in a paragraph. But this will only show if data is actually updated. But currently data is an empty array, right? So using use effect to trigger API calls on components, like I explained, use effect is a React hook that runs side effects in a functional component. Is used to trigger API calls when a component mounts. So looking at this example, you can see that there is a state here, data and set data, right? There's a use effect here, and this has an empty dependency. If you remember the last class, we said if there's an empty dependency, it ensures that it only runs once. So you don't have to call this endpoint more than once. And once you get the results, you keep it inside of state. That's why we have the set data response.data. So the data that is coming from the response will be set into data here, so that at the end of the day, we are going to have something here that will override the empty array. All right, and all of these things are happening inside of the use effects, so that you don't need to fetch all the time. All right, next we want to display, of course, this is a happy moment because we have elements in our array. So it's going to be data.map, and we're going to display the title, right? All right, so how do you handle loading and error states? If you have once used an app, part of the ways you can make your app to be very user-friendly is applying this loading and error states. And what do I mean? When you are requesting for data on the from the back end, you trigger you let it, you trigger a state of a loading state. So what it means that at that time it's a fetching operation is being carried out, and you want the users to probably relax and say, okay, we are fetching, you can relax with this circular was a spinner. So the spinner keeps rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling, and once there's a response, the spinner stops. That means the loading state will be what? False. So it helps to make your app more user friendly. Your app communicates with the users. You're like, okay, it's fetching, so I don't need to click on anything. But imagine you don't have something, rolling, a circular spinner rolling. You keep requesting and requesting, and it's like, what's going on? This is not working. But when you see that it's rolling, you give it a time to show up. So you need to be able to handle the the loading states and the error states. So it will enhance user experience, like I mentioned, by showing feedback while fetching data, and it prevents rendering issues when the data is not available. So looking at this, we created another state for loading, and the loading state will be true. Why is the loading state going to be true? You on this particular React page, you want to display the data, that once people get to that page, the data should be displayed. So what it means that as the page is loading, the loading is true. That the spinner will keep rolling until there is results. And we also have a state for error. This error will be set inside of the use effect, inside of the fetch. So how do we go about that? So over here, at default, the loading is true. So once there is a resolution here, that means here it successfully fetches the data and it has successfully updated the data. The loading changes to what? False. So at this point, you don't want to show the users a loading spinner again. You want to show them the results. That's why you set the loading to be false. So like coming down to error, if there's an error now, if there's an error, you want to set your error to the new error that is coming. So error.message. And you also want to set your loading to be false. So in any way, if you get results, you have to set your loading to be false. If you get error also, you have to set your loading to be false, so that it doesn't going to show on endlessly. So and you can see an if command here, that if the loading is true, show loading. So this is where you probably want to put your spinner. If the loading is true, you should show loading. If there's an error, you should also display the error. So in this case, if any of this is true, it won't display data at all. It won't display this. So if the loading is false, it will jump this, come back here. If the error is false, then it will load the data. That means you actually got the data correctly from the back end, right? Yeah, I hope you guys understand that it's simple and straightforward, and it's something that you need to, when you see it in the code, you understand that, okay, this is why this is used. So it's actually worth the while. So can we provide answers to this? So what does useState do in React? And what's the purpose of useEffect? So I'm going to check our answers one after the other. Okay. All right. So at this point, I might likely reduce the so that I can follow up on your responses. All right. So all right. So you probably try to manage my screen as it is, so that I can also follow up your responses, right? So what I'll do is probably increase. Where is it? All right. Is this fair enough? Is that fair enough? Yeah. Can you see it? I think it's better. Oh, thank you, Jason. So useState is used to fetch to make changes to to state of a component. So it stores an update change. So B is the answer here. Use effect is used to undo side effects in functional components. So it is not used to create new state variable, no. It doesn't replace Redux for state management, no. Redux is used for global state management. So it makes React component render, no. Use effects perform side effects in components. So the answer is A, right? So let's move on to the next one. All right, I'm going to increase this. Yeah. Yeah, you can all see it now. So can you provide answers to this? So we're wrapping up. We just have 2 more questions and we're done. Yeah, so how do you ensure API call runs only once when a component mounts? So what's the answer to that number? What happens if you don't handle loading state in API calls? Yeah, so for you to load only once, then you have to pass an empty dependency array to use effect. So B is the answer. So what happens if you don't handle loading state in API calls? The app will not fetch data. No, loading state is just to help user to make your app to be user friendly. So either you use the loading state or not, your app will either fetch or will not fetch. So it doesn't matter. So users may see a blank screen or an inconsistent UI. Is that? So yeah, B is the answer, because users will see blank screen while it's fetching. Users will be like, okay, what's going on? Oh, Ibrahim, you're having network issues. So sorry about that. So, but you are right on track. The answer is B. The answer to the first one is B. Second is B. So you don't want users to have this blank page because you are fetching data from the backend. You want to keep them waiting, like hopeful that, okay, you want to use loading, you want to use a spinner, as it were, to keep them waiting that, yeah, we are trying to fetch something on the background, please wait, which makes sense. So users may see blank screen, and once the loading state is false, the data is going to be displayed. Yeah. All right, so let's move to the next one. So I'm going to maximize it over, yeah. So this should be the final part. Okay, we still have 2 more questions. So what's the answer to this? How do you handle API errors in React? API errors in React. You ignore them, display an error message using state variables, use alert for every error, refresh the page on error. So I think that was something we did the other time. We placed the error inside of the state in order to manage it, right? So what does dependency array in use effect do? Okay, Jason, you use alert for every error. That is wrong. You display an error message using state variable. So that's the best way to handle error message. You display it using state variable because you want to know if there's an error. So if there is no error, imagine there is no error, you have to just trigger alert. You understand? It's not, it won't be kind of standard, you understand? So but by the time you handle your state error within the state, then it makes a lot of sense. So what does dependency array in use effect do? So dependency array just prevents API calling all the time. So so when you prevent API calls from running, no, determines when the effect should rerun. Yeah, stores fetch data. Use effect does not store. It's just a side effect. To set a timeout, no. So the answer is B. It determines when the effect should rerun. All right, the second to the last part. Okay. All right. So what's the default value of the loading state in the example? Can you remember? Yeah, the loading state has a default value, right? So I think I explained that. So let me have the answers now. So how does Axios handle errors in API requests? Use the catch, automatically retrying requests by showing a default error. Axios does not handle errors. Yeah, of course, you use the catch to catch the error. All right, so the answer, Jason, the answer to your number one is wrong. Yeah, is wrong. Yeah, remember I mentioned that when a page is loading, when you are loading a page, it means that the loading state is true until the end, the data is fetched. The loading page at default will be true. Once the data is now fetched, the loading state will change to false. Yeah. So Ibrahim, you got it correctly. Yeah, so that's the answer. So I hope you all understand. And let's pick the last question. So let me enlarge it a bit. Yeah. So can we give answers to that? That's about the last slide. So why should we use the set loading false in the API call? You don't want it to continue to load even after the data has been supplied. So, and which of the following is not a correct way to store API response? Yeah, what is use effect doing with storing of states? So let me have your answers. I know I've given you some tips already. All right, yeah. Jason says C and B. Israel, is Israel there? I've not seen Israel's response very well. Jeffrey, Solomon, Jason, yeah. Maxwell, are you there? Yeah, Hilary and Louisa. Yeah, so I want to see your answers. So Jason says C and B. Marianne says C and B. Everybody's saying C and B. All right. Okay, so set loading is false, has to be false so that it doesn't load forever. Imagine you have the set loading to be true. It keeps loading and loading and loading and loading when you have even received the data. So that will not really look good for your application. Then for the second one, which of the following is not a correct way to store API response? Unfortunately, most of you chose B. Oh, sorry. Which of the following is not the correct way to store API response? So tricky, right? So let's look at let's try to explain one after the other. So the first one is say const data set data use state. That is correct because you want to the previous value of the data is an empty array, and the set data is the function that actually make changes to the array. So the second one, const data equals use states empty. That seems to be wrong. When you are using a use state, it has to be with both the data and the set function. All right. Yeah. For the number three, I think const data and set data using it with use effects is wrong. Yeah, it's wrong because you can only use this with use states. So I think the question is wrong. It should be which of the following is the correct way to store API response, right? Okay, I believe you all agree with me on that. So the best way to store the way known to store response uh is not C, because that looks like the set data, fetch data. Set data is you are trying to set the data and fetch data. I think that is a correct way too. I think the answer is C. The answer is C. The question is right. The answer is C. If you accept that with me, can you? So are you guys with me? We need to find an answer to this, and we need to break it down. Marianne, what was the answer to number 2? It says response. It says response, so it must be D. Okay. Okay, so it must be D. Is not a correct way, right? Is not a correct way. Marianne, are you giving me an answer? So, okay. Let me first ask this question from, is C the right answer? Is C, let's assume that the question is correct. Is the implementation is C correct? Const data, set data, use effect. Is that correct? No. No. Is that how you use your use effects? I think that's for use state. That's for use state. Jason, is that correct? Is C correct, Israel? Yeah, it's C, because it is wrong. Yeah, it is wrong because you only use C for use states. You understand? You use it for use state, not use effect. So you don't destructure use effect, you destructure use state. So I think from what I'm seeing now, I think the question is correct. Number 1, A is correct. You want to create data and you pass empty array to the data. A is correct. D is also correct. You have a function that fetches data and you want to pass the results into set data. So when you have fetch data as a function and you call it, it's going to return a response. And whatever response I return, as the data returned, it will pass it to through the set data, it will modify the empty array and pass it here, right? So A is correct, B is correct, C is not correct because you don't use effect with this destructuring, as it were. You only use state with it, right? So the controversial one is B. And can we actually have something like this, that data equals use state of empty? Yeah, I've not come across this before, but it is possible. It is possible, right? So our answer here is C. I hope we all understand this. Is there any question? Any question regarding this? I hope you understand the explanation. Yeah. So far, so good. Can you please clear it well? All right, so let me explain again. Okay, so the question is, which of the following is not a correct way to store API response, right? Now, this is correct. For an API response, you have the data, set data, and you have use state. So you want to set, you have initialized the value of the data as empty array, and later you are expecting that the set data will fill it with the response of the data that you have fetched. So this first one is correct, right? The fourth one is also correct because the set data now is receiving the response of this fetch. You've gone to the backend using the URL to fetch the data, and you now set it here to update the value of the data here. So A and D are correct, but C is not correct because when you are using your use effect, you don't use it like use states. This is a use state syntax, not use effect. So that makes it the wrong one. That makes it the answer, right? Then the const data equals use state. This is possible. You can say use state of empty is data. So you are trying to say that, okay, this data is having empty. So the answer is C, because this is not the way to use effect. I hope you understand now. Ibrahim, I hope you understand that explanation. Yeah. So Luisa, you said if B is correct, now B is correct. Which circumstance can we use it? Because it's storing data in a single variable. Yeah. Well, it doesn't actually make sense. Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't make sense to use our state like this, because it's not destructuring it. So what this means is that you have permanently made the data to be empty array. So which means that the data cannot be set, the data cannot be modified, right? So, but this is not going to throw any error. It's not going to throw error. So this one is more like it has hard coded the value of data to be empty array. So if you use set data, it won't work for this because you have not destructured it, right? But it's not going to throw you an error. Lisa, I hope you understand what the explanation. You got it. Thank you so much. All right, we have come to the end of today's training. So I want to thank you all for your time. I hand over to Marian.
Thank you, sir, for another very fulfilling, very effective, very interactive class. We've learned a lot as usual. And well done, you guys. You've tried. We've been interactive. We've been answering all of SAR's questions. Please don't forget, we need to try at least 2 lead code questions every week. And all right, good night. And please remember, for next session, let's try to come on time. Thank you. Good night, guys. Good night, sir.
Good night. Good night, guys.